Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Vasadi Gaura Bhakta-vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Rama. Hare Krishna. So today we'll discuss on the topic of the problem on the importance of systematic scriptural study. And I'll talk about this in three broad parts. First, I'll talk about the importance of scriptural study. Then I'll talk about the specific 4 books that we're discussing. And then we will discuss about the approach of studying those books briefly. So, this is Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, where Krishna talks about a very important principle for progressing towards self-discipline. He says, this is 6th chapter, 24th verse, Shanai Shanai Uparamed, 25th verse. Shanai Shanai Uparamed, Buddhyadati Gruhitaya, Atmasamstham Mana Kritva, Nakinchitapi Chintayet. So, Shanai Shanai. Shanai Shanai is gradually, step by step. Uparamed. So, calm down, silence, quiet the mind. How? Buddhya Dhriti Gruhitaya. Buddhya is intelligence. Dhriti Gruhitaya is Gruhit. Gruhit means held, sustained, carried. And how? Dhriti. Now, Dhriti can mean determination. Dhriti can mean conviction. Dhriti Gruhitaya. Here, Prabhupada translates conviction. Later on in the 18th chapter, when Dhriti is discussing 3 modes, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, at that time, it's referred to as determination. Discuss the relationship between 2 of them. And this way, Atmasamstham Manaha Kritva, that the mana, the mind, focus it, samstham means situated on what? Atmasamstham. Focus it on the self. And nakinchit apichintayet, and don't let it wander anywhere else. So essentially, in this verse, Krishna is addressing the problem of the wandering mind. Now, the wandering mind is a problem for everyone. It is a problem for spiritualists. It is a problem even for materialists. Because even for doing something materially worthwhile, one needs to focus. If one is not able to focus, even if somebody wants to watch a movie, they want to enjoy watching a movie. But if there is too much noise, too much distraction, the mind is going here and there, they can't watch a movie. So the point is, this is a universal problem. This problem is universal. Now, what's happening? Don't let them undo themselves. Okay. So now when we are discussing about this problem, what is the way to deal with it? Sometimes we think that, okay, I just need more willpower. Just stronger willpower, I'll focus and manage my mind. Well, yes and no. See, willpower is important, but it's not just willpower that will be enough, because willpower has to be coupled with a proper process. So, willpower, consider if I have this phone and I let go of this phone. And I said, by my willpower, I will ensure that the phone will not fall. Well, no. Willpower is no match to gravity power. Is it? So now, if my hand is weak and I can't hold it, maybe I have to get someone else to hold it. Maybe I have to keep it at this height, whatever. If floor is inclined in a particular way, I don't want water to go down over here. Willpower, I won't let the water go down. No, it's not going to work. Now I have to use my willpower. Maybe then create some wall or something like that. And willpower has to be coupled with a process. So if we want a focused mind, so I give two examples here. Basically, gravity is just like there is gravity which draws things downwards. Similarly, within our mind there are conditionings. Just as gravity power draws us downwards, so similarly, there is there are conditionings. And the conditionings, the attachments, they act as similarly, they drag downward. Now, what will be downward can be varying for different people. For some people, it may be anger. Every small thing provokes them, makes them angry. For somebody, it may be lust. For somebody, it may be greed. There's no need for this, I think. Just take it. Move aside. So, when this is happening, we need a process for dealing with this. And this verse is talking about that process. What is that process? Krishna is basically telling over here that there is first stage is conviction of intelligence. Then there is practice of yoga. And then there will be purification of mind. Let's look at these three things. These are three stages. If I want my mind to be focused, the first thing I'll need is the conviction of the intelligence that this is beneficial, this is important. I need to do this. Can we disallow people from muting themselves? Allow pardon. I've done that. Over there now.
No, it won't come.
I did that one still. Is there somebody else a co-admin? So now, with this conviction of intelligence, there is a practice of yoga. I'll explain these three stages. First of all, our intelligence needs to be convinced. This is a good thing to do. Focusing the mind is important. If I don't focus the mind, it's going to be distracting. And we may know it, but we need to remember it and be convinced about it. So conviction of intelligence. And then practice of yoga. In our case, it is bhakti yoga. When there is practice of yoga, bhakti yoga, then gradually by this there will be the purification of the mind. And when there is purification of the mind, what does purification of the mind mean? Basically, if there is a impure mind, then what it means is it has an inner inclination toward sense objects. So whenever our consciousness comes over here, it will naturally, consciousness like water, it will naturally flow in a particular direction. It's just natural. If somebody is very attached to money, somebody is very attached to fame, somebody is very attached to power, then everything they will be seeing from that frame only. Their mind is inclined that way. Thoughts will naturally go in that direction. So this is the impure mind. And as long as the mind is impure, just saying, oh, I don't want to think about it, I won't think about it. No, thoughts are going to go in that direction. In contrast, what is a pure mind? The inclination has changed. And whenever the consciousness is free, it immediately goes towards Krishna. So instead of being inclined toward the sense objects, it has not only become horizontal, but it's become tilted the other way. So as soon as somebody has free time, okay, let me open the Bhagavatam and read it. Let me chant the holy names. Let me think about how I can increase my service to Krishna. So we want to have our mind to go from this journey to this journey. We want to go from impure mind, I want to make it pure. And for that purpose, we need to change the inclination of the mind. Just say, I won't think about this, I won't think about this. That's not going to be enough. Yes, we need to have the determination, but the determination has to be coupled with a process that will change the inclination of the mind. And essentially, Bhakti Yoga is that process. In Bhakti Yoga, what we do is we repeatedly expose the mind to Krishna, and slowly the mind starts realizing, hey, Krishna is wonderful. It's so pleasant, it's so peaceful, it's so empowering. That's what I should be focusing on. And gradually the mind will realize it. So for this change to happen, it has to begin with conviction of the intelligence. It is a conviction of the intelligence that will keep us on the spiritual platform. Let's look at it from another perspective, based on 342 in the Bhagavad Gita. That here Krishna gives an inner hierarchy. He says, Indriyani paranyahur indriyebhya param manaha manasastu para buddhe yo buddhe paratastu sabha. So at the bottom there are sense objects, then there are senses, then there is the mind, then there is the intelligence. So now we could say that this is the conditioned self, the conditioned soul. Now, by the power of gravity, there is a natural downward pull. There is, in this way, the soul, we could say we could call the power of gravity, or you can say the power of attachments. Our conditionings, our attachments, because of them, the soul gets pulled toward the sense objects. This is the normal thing that happens, just default. And what is the solution for this? The solution for this is actually this inner hierarchy itself is described in 3.42. But what we need is, now above this is the super soul, it's Krishna. So when we will have love for Krishna, then what will happen is there will be a powerful upward force. This is what we can say is Preeti. Preeti is love for Krishna. And there's affection for Krishna. The upward connect of the soul with Krishna will ensure that the downward pull will be countered. It's like if somebody is falling from a mountain top. If they have something firm to hold on to and they are strong enough to hold on to it, then they will not fall. As soon as they loosen their grip, they will fall. So Jiva Goswami explains that till the point we don't have this Preeti, our primary connection with Krishna is through Buddhi. You could use instead of Preeti, you could simply use the word Bhakti. Here, Bhakti means not just the practice of Bhakti, but the development of love for Krishna, the culmination of Bhakti. So, till our Bhakti is not strong, I like Nashta Prayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavad Sevaya Bhagavatir Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nishtiki. So it described when we go to that stage where Bhakti becomes very strong, then we become joyful. Then what happens? The inner struggle is over. Because the Rajas Tamas, the lower modes are no longer pulling us, the attachments are no longer that powerful. But till that point, the struggle is there. So during this journey, when the Bhakti is not yet strong, Buddhi is extremely important. It is Buddhi that will keep us connected with Krishna. It is the Buddhi that will keep us practicing the process that connects us with Krishna. So now, Bhakti Yoga, we say essentially it is connecting with Krishna. The essence of Bhakti Yoga is connecting with Krishna. And we connect with Krishna by many ways, but all of them involve, at least to some extent, focusing our mind on Krishna. So for us to practice Bhakti, buddhi becomes extremely important. Now, here when we are using the word buddhi, we are not only using it to mean scriptural study. It is scriptural study which gives us the conviction that will help us focus on Krishna at other times also. Now, we have to do various services, we have to interact with the world. At that time, we encounter various sense objects. So, how do we ensure that we don't get tempted by those sense objects? There will be a downward pull. Whether we are brahmacharis, grihasthas, whatever role we are, whatever service we are doing, we'll all encounter some sense objects or the other. So our buddhi needs to be strong enough that when the downward pull of the sense objects comes, we are able to counter it. And not only just stay away from the sense objects, but stay connected with Krishna. So buddhi has to help us stay connected upward. And that nourishment of the buddhi, so if you want to strengthen buddhi, that actually buddhi is nourished primarily by Shastra. So different elements of our being are nourished by different things. Our intelligence, that will should give us the conviction to stay connected with Krishna, will be nourished by Shastra. Why is that? Essentially, buddhi, what is its purpose? It is to discern the good and the bad, the right and the wrong. Krishna talks about that. A well-situated intelligence, pravrittim cha nivrittim cha karya karye bhaya bhaye bandham moksham cha ya vetti buddhi sa partha satviki. In 1830, he says that karya akarya. He gives various different categories. Good and bad is a broad categorization. He says pravrittim cha nivrittim cha. So, what is natural to be done? Pravritti. What is not to be done? Pravrittim cha nivrittim cha. Karya karye bhaya bhaye. What is to be feared and what is not to be feared. Say, Prabhupada would say that one of his greatest concerns was that his followers are not sufficiently afraid of Maya. So there's something which is feared and it is to be good. We fear it. Something, okay, performing some austerity like fasting or waking up in the morning. This is very difficult. Yeah, but don't fear it. It's for good. What is to be feared, what is not to be feared. Bandham moksham chaya vetti. What will lead to bondage, what will lead to liberation? That is understood through buddhi. So the purpose of buddhi is to nourish our inner compass. The buddhi is the basis of our inner compass to know what is right and what is wrong. And in Shastra, there are many subjects that are there. In Shastra, there is, for example, in the fifth canto, there's cosmology. In the we were discussing about Sankhya earlier, one of the Bhagavatam classes. Shastra, there are many things, but the primary focus, if you want a Shastra to nourish our buddhi, is that Shastra is a guidebook for understanding, for responsible decision making. The Bhagavad Gita talks about various yogas, but essentially, the Bhagavad Gita is guiding Arjuna to make a decision. So when we are studying Shastra also, our focus should be on the Shastra as a guidebook for choosing, for wise decision making. So somebody may say that I know a lot of scripture, but somebody may have memorized the whole Bhagavad Gita, but they say that person is there are some academic scholars who are very good at their intellectual work. But if somebody may know the whole Bhagavad Gita back and to front and back and everything, but that person is smoking or drinking or whatever, now what is the use of that knowledge? That is intellectual knowledge. But here when we are talking about buddhi, when is buddhi nourished by the study of Shastra? When we study Shastra primarily as a guidebook for choosing, for judiciously acting. And that is what is the conclusion of the Gita. At the end of the Gita, Arjuna doesn't say to Krishna, hey, nice lecture, Krishna. What does Arjuna say? Karishye vachinam tava. I will do your will. What that means is Arjuna has understood that Krishna is a trustworthy guide. Krishna is my greatest well-wisher and let me act in a mood of service to Krishna. So this is the first point, that scriptural study is important for us if we want to practice bhakti and experience the transformative effects of bhakti. We want our mind to become focused, our mind to become absorbed in Krishna. And we say bhakti is joyful, but the joyfulness of bhakti is largely dependent on the absorption of the mind. If our mind is not absorbed, a beautiful kirtan may be going on, or a nice katha is going on, but if you're thinking, oh, this devotee spoke like this to me, why did they speak like that to me? If that's what we are thinking like that, then we will not be able to relish it. So, the taste of bhakti, it is joyful, but the taste of bhakti, it becomes accessible at the very least when there is focus of the mind. So for us, we want to focus the mind not just because the mind will go in unwanted directions and make us do wrong activities, but focus of the mind, that taste of bhakti cannot be accessed if the mind is not focused. So from both perspectives, for us to go away from self-destructive choices, from pleasures that end in troubles, and for us to experience bhakti, we need buddhi. So buddhi, in this, so to conclude this section, buddhi, what it does is there's two aspects. It keeps us at a safe distance from temptations in general. Temptations can be different for different people. So from the sense objects, buddhi gives us the life to keep a safe distance from it. And it is buddhi that keeps us focused on Krishna, thereby tasting his sweetness. The Bhagavatam, several points, several places, this theme is repeated, that the detachment from the material and attachment to the Lord. This is the path of auspiciousness for the soul. And both of these are achieved through, not through buddhi alone. Buddhi that will lead us to the practice of bhakti. And bhakti will bring about the transformation. So that's the importance of buddhi for us. Now, having said this, till this point, I mentioned how buddhi is important for the practice of bhakti. However, now I'll make a slightly different point. So the way I was describing it, like this is bhakti, and then buddhi is what enables us to keep practicing bhakti. So bhakti is one thing, and buddhi is another thing which helps us practice bhakti. That's one way of looking at it, and it's important to look at it that way. However, when we talk about bhakti, bhakti is a broad set of activities, and using buddhi is itself a part of bhakti. It's a slightly different point I'm making now. So the first is something which is universal. Every devotee needs to have sufficient buddhi by which they can choose wisely. That is required. But beyond that, some of us, our buddhi, now here I'm using the word buddhi in a broader sense. Buddhi can be used for decision making, but buddhi has multiple aspects. Like we say, yeah. So buddhi as decision making is something which is, it's universal. It's something which everyone needs to have. But buddhi also has another aspect, which you can broadly say is information processing. Now, sometimes we downplay this, but Brahmanas are able to, they have intellectual capacity. They can memorize verses, analyze verses, they can memorize, contextualize, analyze, explain. All this is a specific ability. So this may not be something which everyone will do equally. Different devotees, after they start practicing bhakti, they may take up different services. Some devotees may specifically take up the service of teaching and preaching. Others may become managers, some may become fundraisers, some may become pujaris, some may become counselors and mentors, some may become book distributors. So, for everyone, buddhi as an aspect of decision making, as a resource for decision making, is required. And that is a basic level of Shastra everyone needs to know. Along with that, so here when I'm talking these are separate, we are saying yes, the buddhi enables us to stay connected with Krishna and helps us to do service to Krishna. However, the second is the buddhi itself becomes the means by which we serve Krishna. What do I mean by that? Somebody becomes a teacher. Then their primary service is to study scripture and teach scripture. This may not be the same degree for everyone. Everybody, it's good for them to be studying and having some forum where they're sharing bhakti. But different devotees may do it to different degrees. Some people may be more intellectually inclined. So, not everybody while studying scripture has to memorize a lot of verses. Not everybody has to have the capacity to answer complex technical philosophical questions. Not everybody needs to have a very attractive delivery or a charismatic way of speaking. That is an ability that comes by karma, and not everybody may have that. But we need to understand that for everyone, buddhi is also a part of their offering to Krishna. For some people, buddhi may be a major offering to Krishna. Like somebody is very wealthy, their main service may be they give a lot of wealth to Krishna. Somebody may not have that much wealth. They may give some money to Krishna, but they're doing other services for Krishna. So like that, if somebody has a lot of buddhi, then their buddhi becomes their main offering to Krishna. Then their main service is studying and teaching. So here we see that Krishna, if we consider 1870 in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is saying, Adhishyate chayamam dharmyam samvadamavyo jnana yagyena tenaham ishtasyamiti me matihi. So Prabhupada translates this in a very beautiful way. He says that those who study this sacred conversation of ours, he says they are worshipping me with intelligence. So here, so the difference is, earlier it was the intelligence convinces us to worship. But here, what Krishna is talking about something else, we worship with intelligence. I hope the difference is very clear between the two. Oh, I should come to a temple. I saw one cartoon, multitasking and spirituality. So what was that? That was one person was doing puja with one hand and was looking at the mobile with the other hand. So what is the point? If you look at it, offering a consciousness to Krishna, isn't it? So one is my intelligence. Okay, if I want to do this, let me do it wholeheartedly. So there are two forms we're talking about. So the intelligence inspires us to worship. And the second is, this is different from we worship using the intelligence. So worship using the intelligence. What this means is that, say, for me as an author, the main, by speaking and writing, but I define myself much more as an author than as a speaker. So for me, words are the main tools of my trade. So just as a pujari, if they're given flowers, they will want to decorate Krishna with the best flowers arranged in the best possible way. So for me, words are like that. I'll think of words, the best words to use, and the best words to use in the best possible combination. So that a particular point is communicated properly. So for everyone, words are a tool for communication. And that's required. We all need basic level of mastery of words so that we can communicate. But for some people, words may not just be tools for communication. Words may themselves be an expression of devotion, an artistic expression of devotion. So these are two different things. They're related but different. So, and especially those of us who have come from a well-educated background where we have studied, we have excelled in our studies. So we have that buddhi. Now we have that capacity to use the buddhi not just to do other services, to be convinced to do other services of Krishna, but use buddhi itself in the service of Krishna. And then for that purpose, studying scripture is not just one service. Scripture should become like our home territory. It's like, oh, just like when we are traveling, we come back to our home base, we feel comfortable. So for a devotee, Shastra should become like the home for our consciousness. Means wherever I go, I have to do this service, I have to talk with this person, I have to deal with this problem, I do all that. But just as we eagerly look forward to come back home, so we eagerly look for when can I come back to home? When can I read Shastra? When I'm at Shastra, I'm at Krishna's lotus feet. I am hearing Krishna's message. I'm hearing Krishna's wisdom. So when this happens, this is where we become very, very safe and steady in Bhakti. Dhautatma Purusha Krishna Padamulam Namunchiti Mukta Sarva Pariklesha Pantha Swasharanam Yatha. Just as a pantha, a traveler will come back home, feels so peaceful, especially if it's a long troubled journey. Like that, a devotee feels at home when it comes back to the thoughts come back to Krishna's lotus feet. Now, this can be many different things. It doesn't have to be Shastra only. For some people, it might be just Kirtan. For some people, it might just be go for the morning program, behold the deities. And we are, I am back, I am safe. So we have to find what makes us feel at home. For some people, it may be Shastra. So this is Shastra being used, not just used to convince us to do other services, but Shastra itself, Buddhi being used, Shastra convincing us to use Buddhi for serving Krishna directly. So with this background, now let's move on to the second major part of the talk. I won't go to third part. Let's look at systematic scriptural study in terms of the Bhakti Shastra course. So why is systematic study important? Because the buddhi needs to be nourished regularly. Just like our body needs regular food. For us, eating is a conscious activity. If you consider the body, let's compare the body to buddhi. So we say, energy consumption is often unconscious. Unconscious means that just by being physically active, by going here, going there. Sometimes you may do physically strenuous activity. We lift a lot of books or carry a lot of luggage. But even if you're not doing that, the energy consumption is just happening just by our existing and functioning. The energy is getting consumed. But there has to be energy generation. And this usually has to be conscious. We may not be conscious that my body is exhausting energy, but you will be conscious. Now I'm feeling hungry. Now I have to eat food. So this generation, if it is not done, then what will happen is we will get exhausted. Now, of course, because the body is very gross and because our consciousness is very caught in the body, it is very rare that we'll forget that I'm hungry. In fact, we remember food even when before we feel hungry. So with respect to the body, this consciousness, it comes very easily. In fact, you can say it's not just easy, it's excessively easy. It's excessive also at times. But with respect to buddhi, again, the energy consumption is often unconscious. Why is it unconscious here? Because the body, because our intelligence in the world is constantly encountering so many stimuli. It is encountering tempting sense objects, it is encountering, if not something not tempting, it is just agitating, exasperating. There are difficult people, there are problematic situations. And all of these, among all these, to stay focused, it requires energy. Okay, what am I here? What am I doing? Am I focused on doing that? So at the level of the buddhi, the energy that keeps the buddhi functioning, that is constantly being consumed, that is constantly being depleted. So we could say that in 24 hours of the day, we are encountering various rajo guna, tamo guna most of the time. All this is depleting our energy. And that's why we need to consciously rejuvenate the energy. So there has to be again energy generation. Now, because what happens is, with respect to the buddhi, with respect to the body, if we don't eat, we feel so weak and we can't function. With respect to the buddhi, if our buddhi becomes weak, it's not that we can't function, rather we malfunction. It's not there's the difference between becoming dysfunctional, because there's dysfunction and malfunction. Dysfunction means that it doesn't, like if I have a fan, it's dysfunction. That means it's not moving around. Hmm? But if I have a car that malfunctions, what that means, I turn the steering wheel in one direction, the car goes in the opposite direction. Hey, it's dangerous. So with a weak body, what does it do? It there's a dysfunction. But with respect to a weak mind, what is there? There is malfunction. So because a weak let's put a weak mind, a weak buddhi, specifically can put as buddhi. Sorry. Weak buddhi, there is malfunction. That means we start making unwise choices and we start getting ourselves into trouble. And therefore, this has to be consciously done regularly. That's why we need regular or systematic scriptural study. We will need, just as we need to eat food regularly, we need to study scripture regularly. Now we could say that, yeah, we have our daily Bhagavatam classes, that's why we're studying. Yeah, the Bhagavatam classes are more of a inspirational study of scripture than a systematic study of scripture. Because what happens in the Bhagavatam classes, you take one verse, and then for most devotees, when there's a class on one verse, it becomes a class on Krishna consciousness. It's not a class on the Bhagavatam. Because getting the difference? That verse becomes a takeoff point for that devotee to share their realization in Krishna consciousness. And that is good. We get multiple perspectives, nourishes in its own way. But that we are not so much studying Bhagavatam as we are refreshing Krishna consciousness. But Bhagavatam study itself is a different thing. We have Bhakti Vaibhav courses where we take focus on the Bhakti. This is the section, these are the verses, these are the point going from this verse to this verse to this verse. Similarly, if you consider our Bhagavad Gita course, actually our Bhagavad Gita course is mostly a pre-Bhagavad Gita course, isn't it? If you consider Bhagavad Gita, we talk about Jiv Ishvara Kala Karma Prakriti. That's the kind of concept we talk about. Now, in the Bhagavad Gita, how much does the Gita talk about the existence of God? No, it's just assumed. It's assumed. Even Krishna is in the, it is to Jiva also, the Atma. Krishna is not so much proving the existence of God, existence of soul, as emphasizing the indestructibility of the soul. Isn't it? There's a difference. That Krishna is not giving any evidence as such, past life memories, any other experiences or something like that. Similarly, with respect to karma, Krishna is not explaining the law of karma. Krishna is telling the consequences of karma and how to keep oneself free from karma. That's the focus of the Gita. But today, when we speak, we have to first establish that something like karma exists. Isn't it? So when we teach the Bhagavad Gita at introductory level, it's not a Gita course, it's a pre-Gita course. So we are introducing people to the basic concepts of the Gita, so that, not the basic concepts of the Gita, we're talking about introducing people to the basic concepts that are discussed in the Gita, so that later they can understand how those concepts are discussed in the Gita. So, and that's fine, that's what is required for most audiences. But the point I'm making is that there is a difference between inspirational study and a systematic study. Systematic study is where you focus on the verses, try to understand their message, and we start developing a proper appreciation of what is going on in the book itself. So that is systematic study of scripture. That is the first part of this talk. Any questions until this point? Okay. Yes.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Prabhu, how body and buddhi are helping each other?
How who?
Body and buddhi.
No, they're not helping each other. I'm talking about body as analog. It's like in the body, there's an energy being consumed and energy being generated. So similarly, with the buddhi, energy is being consumed and energy is being generated. See, every time we are thinking and making a good choice, to make that good choice, our buddhi is being utilized. But when the buddhi is being utilized, it is also being exhausted. So it needs to be rejuvenated. So I'm not saying that the two help each other. But of course, you can say at one level, if the body is fit, then the buddhi can function better. Because otherwise the buddhi is, uh, if say, while speaking, right now, I have some pain in my neck. Then half of my consciousness will go, at least half or one, I shouldn't move my neck too much. Shouldn't move my neck suddenly. So if I have some pain in my throat, then I had to speak in such a way, maybe some sounds, they increase the pain. So what happens is the buddhi is not functioning properly, then we will not be able to, a certain amount of our consciousness will go in making sure to manage the body properly. And then less consciousness will be available for further decision making.
What is the purpose way of writing purpose? I felt purpose writing purpose in an inspirational way, not systematic. Is that correct or not? What's your understanding?
Is Prabhupada's writing is purport and inspirational systematic way? It's both. Prabhupada's focus is more on Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada focuses more on making sure that the essential conclusion is given clearly. And he doesn't go too much into the technicalities of the subject. But he doesn't deny us access to technicalities. He does give us the verses, he does give us the Sanskrit, he gives the transliteration. So I'll talk about Prabhupada's style if we get time a little bit later. Okay. There's one more question here. Does a good material intelligence mean that we will have good if we have good material knowledge? Does that mean we'll have good intelligence for studying Shastra? And if bad material intelligence will mean that our systematic understanding of Shastra will also be a struggle? Well, not necessarily. Because as I said, there are two different things. One is that buddhi as a basis for decision making. And that is something which everybody can have irrespective of, we could say, their IQ, their memorizing capacity, their analyzing capacity, their articulating capacity. All these are secondary. They will be able to choose themselves wisely. That everybody can do. Now, when we say somebody has good material knowledge, there's a difference between material knowledge. Does one need a lot of material knowledge to gain spiritual knowledge? No. We're talking about because good intelligence. Somebody has studied. Somebody has the habit of studying. Somebody has the habit of applying themselves to the process of study. Then they can study scripture also nicely. So it's a tool. How much we use the tool? Like I give the example of Artha. Is it that because somebody does not have enough wealth, does that mean they can't serve Krishna? Well, no. Everybody can serve Krishna. But maybe that wealth may not be a major part of their service to Krishna. So, how much we emphasize, if our inspiration is to become a teacher of scripture, then definitely we need to develop our intelligence. We need to give adequate time to study scripture. And some preachers or some teachers uh, may be able to prepare much faster. Some teachers may require more time to prepare. It varies from person to person. So we have to find out what resources we have, what capacities we have, and function accordingly. Yes.
Thank you for very beautifully described the first part. The question was this decision making which you spoke. It comes primarily because of whatever we read, we contemplate a lot on it, or repeated reading because every day we read, so because of that intelligence.
Both ways. Repetition also brings, so we say that buddhi, how does it become strong? Is it by contemplation or is it by repetition? Yeah, I'm explaining it. Is it by contemplation or by repetition? It is by both. See, you can use the example of vocabulary. All of us have a certain active vocabulary. That means those are the words we use in our conversations. But we also have some passive vocabulary. That means we know those words. And if somebody else uses that word, yeah, that's a good word. But when we are speaking, we won't remember that word. So what happens is, uh, if you want to improve our vocabulary, we want to get more and more words from our passive vocabulary to our active vocabulary. So whenever we find a good word, hey, I would like to use that. Think how I can use it. So, like, so now one way a word can come from the passive vocabulary to active vocabulary is if it is repeatedly used by people around us. Most of us, before we came to Bhakti, probably had never heard the word transcendental, isn't it? No, it's such a common part of our lexicon. So, like that, when we hear certain philosophical points repeatedly, those points go from our passive knowledge to our active knowledge. So, in that sense, repetition is also helpful for decision making. That the temptations of this world are entangling, they are deceptive, they are degrading. The world doesn't tell us that. But when we keep repeatedly hearing it, that reminder is helpful. So repetition has its value. And now contemplation, different devotees can do it to different degrees. Now what contemplation does is the contemplation can involve many things. But the essence point of contemplation is, how does this apply to me? This question is the basis of contemplation. Sometimes there's a class with 500,000 people. The speaker makes a point. The point may be very strong. Most people think, yeah, this point is for everyone else. The mind has a tendency to think, yeah, this is all basic knowledge is for everyone. But maybe it's meant for me also. Humble basis. So, in that sense, contemplation is good if we can do it. How much we do it, it will vary from person to person. But some basic level of contemplation, maybe at the end of a class, just think, is there any one point that struck me? Why did it strike me? Why did it become so important for me? Like that, we can start some contemplation.
Devotees find tough time writing exams, open book assignments. But the Bhakti Shastri course has this inclusion that you have to pass closed book exam, open books. So, what way it helps a devotee? Like, what is the purpose of keeping the exam evaluation, and how it will help the devotees?
So, how does an exam help? Well, at a basic level, what exams do is they engage your rajoguna. We live in the material world, and rajoguna is a part of the material world. There is that zeal for tangible achievement. We all want that to some extent. So that in Sattva-guna, we value subtle things. Value subtle things. And it's important. We also have Sattva, we want to nourish our Sattva-guna. But we can't just wish away the Rajoguna that is. Now, Srila Prabhupada wanted to distribute books, and Prabhupada had setting targets, distribute 1,000 books, just double it. So now, at one level, of course, it's transcendental because we are distributing Krishna's message. But it channels the Rajoguna. Yeah, I want to do more. I achieved this many books. I achieved this. So this is my book distribution score. So in one sense, whenever some activity becomes very time bound, there is this much I have to study, this I have to memorize, this much I have to gain marks. So in general, quantification is a characteristic of Rajoguna. Now I won't say always, but in general, quantification wherever is there, that is a quality of characters of Rajoguna. And that is helpful and many times for us to channel our energy. So we are in one sense using the Rajoguna to intensify our bhakti. So most of the times, if we look at our own lives, I don't know about yours, but I've seen that most of my best work happens when there is a deadline. You ask your senior devotees, if they had no service of teaching, how many of them would have time for studying scripture? Now we should be studying scripture not just so that we can teach it to others. We should study it so that we learn ourselves. But I'll learn later. It becomes like that. So now, of course, when we study scripture, we study for teaching others. At the time, we ourselves are also learning. So, but in general, having something concrete, it engages our rajoguna. It makes us take things seriously, which we might not take as seriously otherwise. If we are in Sattva we ourselves have a habit of studying, we love studying, then whatever is achieved through, say, we give exams, we have to memorize certain things, we have to analyze certain things. All those things we will do automatically ourselves. But most of the times we'll keep postponing it. So even if we say, I know I'm Sattva I'm not in Rajoguna. But the problem is much of our bhakti practice is also in Rajoguna, isn't it? We are having targets in all of the services. So, okay, we want to do a one-time program, we want to get this many people for this program. We want to do a festival, we want this many people to come for this festival. So when there is anyway Rajoguna in other services, and Shastra study becomes the only service without any Rajoguna, then what happens? Again, we'll gravitate toward other services and we'll neglect Shastric study. So many devotees have been able to study Shastra because they join some courses. So when they join a course, you feel that, okay, now I want to complete this course, I want to get this degree, I don't want to be a dropout. so that tendency, it just engages our Rajoguna. We can talk about many other things, but at a very basic practical level, I would say it engages Rajoguna. Okay. So if we make right decisions consistently, does it strengthen our buddhi? Yes, of course. Buddhi is like muscles. So the more we use our muscles, the muscles will grow. But as another part of it, the more we use our muscles, the muscles will grow, provided we are feeding them, isn't it? Exercise is what strengthens the muscles, but exercise itself doesn't nourish the muscles. You have to take food separately. So similarly, when we face difficult situations, and in those situations we make good choices, that is nourishing the intelligence. But it is just like, you can say, exercise. What it does is it strengthens our muscles, but it also exhausts the muscles, isn't it? But you could say, in a sense, you could say it is that it is the strengthening itself happens through the exhausting. So similarly for us, when we use our intelligence properly, it strengthens the intelligence. But in strengthening, it exhausts. Basically, how do our muscles grow? When you exercise them, the muscles break and they reform. And they reform at a better level. So like that, using our buddhi properly, making good decisions will definitely strengthen our intelligence. But at the same time, it will exhaust it. And that's why we need to rejuvenate it. Now, so the mind, intelligence, and ego are a part of the subtle body. That means they are not part of the soul. Then is the soul responsible for driving buddhi? Yes, of course. Just as we are responsible for our body, isn't it? If suddenly my hand rises and slaps you, you say, I didn't slap, my hand slapped, my body slapped. Well, it is you are in charge of the body, isn't it? So we are responsible. We are meant to drive it properly. So yes, we are responsible for how our buddhi functions. So if we are given a service where we are not able to engage our intelligence, is that good for us? Should we try to change the service or tolerate it? Well, it depends. If we have a strong intelligence, and no, actually, in one sense, all services require intelligence. It's just different kinds of intelligence to different degrees. If we are doing the service of cleaning the temple, you say that is just a mechanical service. Well, that is true, but while we are cleaning, we can also be thinking, how can I do this more efficiently? What are the ways in which every service can be improved? And we think about it, we can improve it. So when there's one devotee and I, in the early days, we used to do chapati rolling. So if we want to roll chapati, so we would start initially, maybe it takes us 30 seconds to roll one chapati, 1 minute to roll one chapati. It has to come around wrong. But then as we keep practicing, we keep setting goals for ourselves. I want to maybe I should be able to do 2 chapatis in 1 minute, for 3 chapatis in 1 minute. Like that, we keep Keep setting goals, keep trying to think of how we can improve. So buddhi can be used in every service. But some services, as I said, they require buddhi entirely. So it depends on two things. Whenever with respect to service choice is there are two things which we consider. That there is our position and there is our disposition. So disposition is our swabhava. If we are more Brahmanically oriented, then it is good that we find a service which is more engaging our intelligence more. Now that may happen immediately or that can happen gradually. In general, for devotees, as a matter of surrender, we accept whatever services we are given. But there is surrender and there is sustainability. Sustainability is possible when we are doing service according to our nature. So gradually, we need to find service which is more in harmony with our nature and do that. So that's disposition. A position means if we are taking up some responsibility, then we need to do the service, whatever is required for that service. If somebody is, say, taking the responsibility of kitchen management, and the devotee says, Prasad is not cooked. Don't disturb me. This is my Shastra study time. Well, yeah, you have your Shastra study time, but that shouldn't interfere with the time when Prasad is to be cooked. If you're taking a particular service, you have to do that service. So, in general, at least in the initial stages, we do whatever service we are told and we observe ourselves and then talk with senior devotees and try to gradually move towards services that are more in harmony with our nature. Okay. So, any other questions or comments? So, let me make a couple of points over here about the 4 books that Srila Prabhupada himself has that are used in the Bhakti Shastri. It's a big subject, but quickly I'll explain this. See how the Ishopanishad. Each of these books actually reveals a different dimension of Srila Prabhupada as author. Srila Prabhupada, in one sense, sometimes Prabhupada was very clear. It's an international society for Krishna consciousness, not God consciousness. Prabhupada was very forthright in saying that, speak about Krishna. But that same Srila Prabhupada in the Ishopanishad practically never uses the word Krishna. He uses the word God, he uses the word Lord, he uses the word Supreme. Prabhupada doesn't use Krishna in that. Why? Because Ishopanishad, the Upanishads are, when Prabhupada is drawing Ishopanishad, Prabhupada is basically using from our traditional category, Shruti. And the Upanishads are generally considered to be more for the Jnanis. They're considered more, and Jnanis often tend to be impersonalists, not always. So now for the impersonalists, if you start right away by using the person, then they will get alienated. So Prabhupada talks about the personal dimension of the absolute truth very emphatically throughout the Ishopanishad. But Prabhupada is not making it in the face. He's giving rational arguments to establish the rational and scriptural arguments to establish a personality of the absolute truth. But he's not using the word Krishna. So sometimes we use, if you do this, you are faithful to Prabhupada. If you don't do this, you are not faithful to Prabhupada. Well, Prabhupada is far bigger than our conceptions of Prabhupada. So Prabhupada has used many different strategies at different times. So the Ishopanishad, Prabhupada, because the Upanishads basically are books which are primarily loved and read by the Jnanis who tend to go toward impersonalism. So Prabhupada is using the Ishopanishad in one sense. Its primary focus is doing many things over there. It's basically he's bringing the whole purposes from impersonalism towards personalism. That is one of the key themes in his purports over there. So Prabhupada is using that as a foundation. And in fact, Prabhupada didn't write the book Ishopanishad. Ishopanishad was basically a series of articles that he wrote in the early Back to Godhead. In the pre-ISKCON 1940s, when he was running the Back to Godhead, at that time he wrote these books. Now, I'll come to the Bhagavad Gita, the last. But now, if you consider, the Ishopanishad is giving us a broad philosophical understanding of the nature of the ultimate reality. Then let's go to Gita. So the Ishopanishad and the Gita in this are more about Tattva. They are about the understanding the absolute truth. In the Gita, Prabhupada, in his purports basically, this is what the Gita also doing. But in the Gita, what Prabhupada is doing is, he is overviewing various yoga process to establish Bhakti Yoga. So Bhakti Yoga and Krishna. So Sadhya is Krishna, Sadhana is Bhakti Yoga. So that is what Prabhupada is emphasizing in his Bhagavad Gita commentaries. And then after that, we have, so in the Gita commentary, there is a flow of the Gita by, so in the Gita by, say 1866 is its conclusion. And the Gita talks about many different parts. It talks about Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Dhyan Yoga. And it's in its own reasoning, Krishna concludes by recommending Bhakti Yoga. Sarvadharman Parityajya Mam Ekam Sharanam Vraja. So, in one sense, so the whole Gita's flow is, there are other yogas, Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Dhyan Yoga. All of these culminate in Bhakti Yoga. That is the overall flow of the Gita. But Srila Prabhupada, what he does in his commentary is, throughout he gives Bhakti Yoga. Now, what is he doing by this? He is basically making sure that we don't get so lost in the technicality of the Gita's analysis that we forget its conclusion. Prabhupada, when he says this Bhagavad Gita as it is, what does it mean? That the conclusion of the Gita is given throughout the Gita consistently. Now, Prabhupada is not neglecting Krishna's words or rejecting Krishna's word at all. Because Prabhupada gives us the Sanskrit, Prabhupada gives us the word-to-word translations. Prabhupada helps us see what Shastra is saying. But then he makes sure that we don't just see what Shastra is saying here right now. What Shastra is saying in conclusion, he shows us that. So Prabhupada's expertise in his commentarial style is that he connects everything in scripture with the conclusion of scripture. And he emphasizes that conclusion consistently. So, with respect to the Gita commentary, what was your question? Same thing, no? Yeah, what was it exactly?
Inspiration.
Okay, yeah, so Prabhupada purpose, are they systematic or are they inspirational? Well, they are systematic because Prabhupada does, for example, build systematic arguments about the personal nature of the divine, about the importance of bhakti. And in that sense, there is systematic explanation of spiritual knowledge. At the same time, the word systematic can mean many things. Systematic can mean rational, logical, and this is logical. Systematic can also mean thematic. Systematic can also mean words by words. Is Prabhupada systematically explained Bhagavad Gita? Yes, of course, words by words commentaries. Thematic is Prabhupada systematic in the sense of thematically building up a theme? Not always. It's not that Srila Prabhupada has one essay which systematically explains the concept of the soul at one place. At one place where Prabhupada explains the concept of the modes. Well, so depending on what we mean by the word systematic as verse by verse, definitely. Systematic as logical, yes. Systematic as one theme exists, explained exhaustively at one place. Some places Prabhupada does it for some things, but generally Prabhupada's focus is on taking, as I said, taking every point and connecting its conclusion. So in that sense, Prabhupada is extremely systematic. We use the word systematic in the sense that there's a system at work over here. And Prabhupada is very systematic. His system is connect everything with the conclusion. Okay? Thank you.
Under this purport or commentary comes of Acharyas of Prabhupada. Now, for one shloka, different Acharyas or Prabhupada give different explanations. Now, Krishna is saying something like, what is the original intent Krishna meant? Because we cannot have at the same time two meanings. Like Krishna is saying, for example, someone is saying, especially give an example, someone is running for election. I am running in the race. So both have different meaning. All the meaning cannot be at the same point at the same time. When Krishna is saying something, only one meaning can be there at a time, right? Means Acharya has so many explanations for
Okay.
one shloka.
So
What
when
exactly Krishna
so when
meant?
scripture is there, acharyas give different meanings. So what is the original meaning of Krishna? Well, it is not necessary that the original meaning has to be only one. Because, say, consider in a class, if there's a class where a senior devotee is speaking to devotees, a close devotee knows everyone. So the devotee may be speaking one particular point, but that one particular point may apply for one devotee in a particular way. And it may apply for another devotee in another way, isn't it? And that the speaker may also be aware. This point I'm speaking for this person for this purpose, for this person for this purpose. So we also say that that verse, the Supreme Lord can do many things through one activity. So even we can do some kind of multitasking. What is the Supreme Lord? So is it that Krishna has one meaning meant, but there are other meanings can be drawn? That's also possible. But it's not necessary that Krishna had only one meaning in mind. So my understanding is that the Bhagavad Gita, I write this in the Bhagavad Gita Insights introduction. The Bhagavad Gita is like a jigsaw puzzle. A normal jigsaw puzzle, you have to put each piece at the right place, then the picture comes out. But the Bhagavad Gita is like a jigsaw puzzle. You can fit the pieces in different ways, and yet beautiful different pictures come out. They're similar pictures. They're pictures of Krishna and Bhakti only, but the picture is fit together in different ways. So each acharya is ultimately coming to the same conclusion, but they're coming to that conclusion from different directions. So particular verses may be read differently, and so it could be that Krishna had multiple meanings in mind. It can also be that Krishna in that context had one particular meaning in mind, but that same Krishna from within the heart of the acharyas is giving them inspiration. Yeah, this can be seen in another context in this way. So we are living at a particular time in a particular circumstance. So sarva dharman pratyaja mamekam sharanam praja. So that in the context of the Bhagavad Gita means that Krishna Arjuna is caught between Kula Dharma and Kshatriya Dharma. He says, forget all your conceptions of your duties and just do what I'm telling you to. That's what literally it means in the context of the Gita. Today, we can use Sarva Dharma Pratyaja as a call to go beyond religious sectarianism. You know, I belong to this religion and you belong to this religion. No, that's not important. Ultimately, are we loving God? Are we surrendering our life to God? That's what is important. That's what Prabhupada said. Jesus is also our Guru because he had so much love for God that he was ready to give up his life for the service of God. So Sarvadharman. So in today's world, religions as we know it exist. In the past, the religions were not there. So today the words can be seen in a particular way. Now, was this meaning intended by Krishna? Maybe, maybe not. But today it is Krishna who can give the Dami Buddhi Yogam. Krishna can help a devotee to see it that way. So as long as the Siddhanta, as long as the consciousness is drawn toward Krishna in a way which is with a proper understanding of Krishna, then that's perfectly fine. Okay. So let me conclude one last point that I was talking about this, about Srila Prabhupada's writings, that there is Ishopnishad. So I talk about through the Ishopnishad and the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada is making the philosophical part clear. Through the Updeshamrit and the Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu. The Updeshamrit, these two are more, both of these, Gita and Ishopnishad are more for the to understand the Tattva. And both of these are more for Achar. Now it's not that black and white. Gita and also Ishopnishad can also guide us in Achar, but Tattva, more of conceptions. So Updeshamrit is more for how to practice bhakti. Now here it's broad principles of practicing bhakti. In the Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu, it goes further deeper into specific limbs or practices within bhakti. This becomes more specific. And then it also becomes, it talks more also about relishing bhakti. Because there is a lot about the experience of Krishna in various contexts and the rasas that come in various contexts. So if you want to consider it like a journey, it's broadly speaking, now it doesn't have to be this way, that Ishopnishad, it helps us to understand God is a person. The Gita helps us understand that that person is Krishna, and that he is to be approached through Bhakti Yoga. Not sadhana, sadhan this is. And then we have nectar of instruction It is how to practice Bhakti Yoga. And we have a Nectar of Devotion. It is more about relishing Bhakti Yoga. So in this way, these 4 books, they cover the basic gamut of our spiritual journey. Again, this is not black and white. Each of these elements come in each of these places also, but they are overall they are very powerful guide for us to become not only convinced about the practice of bhakti, but to become purified and ultimately start tasting Krishna and thereby becoming absorbed in it. So I'll summarize. We discussed first. I started to talk about the importance of buddhi. Buddhi as a impetus for bhakti. We discussed how there is a natural downward pull which will pull us towards sense objects. So that upward connection, when we have love for Krishna, it will come just simply from our priti. But till that upward connect is not developed, we need buddhi, which will connect us with Krishna. Keep us connected with Krishna. Then that was the first major part I discussed. The second was buddhi is not just something which enables us to practice bhakti. Buddhi as part of bhakti. We use buddhi to serve Krishna, not use buddhi to convince ourselves so that we do other services to Krishna. This is especially if we are teaching. Krishna says, studying Gita is worshipping him with his intelligence. Then third part I discussed is about how the systematic study is basically, it will ensure that our buddhi is regularly nourished. So every time we use buddhi, it is strengthening, but it also getting exhausted. So systematic study means that we regularly connect with Krishna and through Shastra, and then Shastra becomes like our constant guidebook. And then last part also talk about the 4 books, how they help us in our spiritual journey, in helping us to understand the identity of the divine, that understand the personality of that the divine is a person, that the person is Krishna who can be approached through Bhakti Yoga, and then how to practice Bhakti Yoga, how to relish Bhakti Yoga. That's how Ishopanishad, Gita, Updeshamrut and Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu are a progression. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Shri Prabhupada ki, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki, Gaur Premanande.
Prabhuji agreed to kindly take this first class, the new batch of Bhakti Shastras is building. So Prabhuji agreed to give this. So let us thank Prabhuji and chanting Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Thank you. Maybe some other time. Want to add some comments?
You reminded me a lot about what is the actual constitution of India and what is patriotism. It is a permanent description of how to dedicate ourselves. Patriotism is a permanent description of a limited object which we can conceive in practice. But the same attachment to the constitution and country can be shifted to Krishna. Then become a global citizen, not confined to one.
So, which part of my talk connected with that?
Because I was thinking, you were saying how different books are taking you to different levels of understanding.
Oh, okay.
In Ishopanishad, you mentioned just now the name of Krishna. Also, given 4 interpretations from Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Bhagavad Gita, Bhushan, Vedanta, Desika, and Bhagavad Gita. Have you seen that book? Huh? It's a classic book. But Bhagavad Gita, those 4 people that you see, very, very powerful. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur